It was April 4th in the year 1928 that Maya Angelou was born. Poet and novelist Maya Angelou, born Marguerite Johnson, is born in St. Louis, Missouri. Her parents divorced when she was 3, and she and her brother went to live with her grandmother in Stamps, Arkansas. When she was 8, she was raped by her mother's boyfriend. When she revealed what had happened to her, her uncles addressed the assailant. As a result, the culprit's eternity was continued. Frightened by the power of her own tongue, Angelou chose not to speak for the next 5 years. From this quiet beginning emerged a young woman who sang, danced, and recorded poetry. After moving to San Francisco with her mother and brother in 1940, Angelou began taking dance lessons, eventually auditioning for professional theater. However, her plans were put on hold when she had a son at the age of 16. She moved to San Diego, worked as a nightclub waitress, tangled with drugs and prostitution, and danced in a strip club. Ironically, the strip club saved her career. She was discovered there by a theater group. She auditioned for an international tour of Porgy and Bess and won a role. From 1954 to 55, she toured 22 countries. In 1959, she moved to New York, became friends with prominent Harlem writers, and got involved with the Civil Rights Movement. In 1961, she moved to Egypt with a boyfriend and edited for the Arab Observer. After leaving her boyfriend, she headed to Ghana, where a car accident severely injured her son. While caring for him in Ghana, she took a job at the African Review, where she stayed for several years. Her writing and personal development flourished under the African cultural renaissance that was taking place. When she returned to the U.S., she began publishing her multi-volume autobiography, starting with I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. 4 more volumes appeared during the next 2 decades, as well as several books of poetry. In 1981, Angelou was appointed Professor of American Studies at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem. She was nominated for several important awards and read a poem written for the occasion at President Clinton's, our nation's 42nd president's inauguration. Angelou continued her eternity on May 28th in 2014 in North Carolina. She was 86 years old. It was April 4th in the year 1933 that a dirigible crashes in New Jersey, continuing the eternity of 73 people in one of the first air disasters in history. The Akron was the largest airship built in the U.S. when it took its first flight in August of 1931. In its short life of less than 2 years, it was involved in 2 fatal accidents. In 1932, the Akron made a flight from New Jersey to Camp Kearney Military Base near San Diego. It attempted to land in high winds with 3 groups of 30 men each assigned to help pull in the airship and secure it to the ground with ropes. But the Akron, which was filled with helium, began to rise again after the sailors had begun to secure it. 3 men held onto the ropes as the Akron rose into the air. 2 of the 3 fell from 200 feet and continued their eternity. The third man, Bud Cowart, managed to hold on at the end of the rope for 2 hours as the Akron dragged him 2,000 feet above the ground. Finally, the crew managed to pull him into the airship through a porthole. The second accident involving the Akron occurred on April 4th in 1933, while the U.S. Navy was using the airship to obtain some technical data over New Jersey. It was well known that dirigibles could experience problems in bad weather, but despite the violent thunderstorms in the area that day, the Akron was not grounded. While in the air over the Atlantic Ocean, a miscommunication over directions by crew members sent the Akron directly into the storm instead of around it. The storm's wind caused the ship to plunge nearly 1,000 feet in a few seconds. The crew then made its second mistake. The dirigible's water ballast was dumped in order to make the flying ship rise. However, the ballast dump thrust the Akron up too far, too fast. Critical devices and cables were destroyed, and all control was lost. The Akron plunged into the ocean. The rescue airship J-3 was sent to help the Akron crew. It also crashed in the storm, continuing the eternity of 2 of the 7 crew members on board. Only 3 of the Akron's 76 crew members survived the disaster. One of the survivors was the commander who had ordered the fateful ballast dump. This was the deadliest air disaster since the crash of the first rigid airship built in the U.S., the Shenandoah, which continued the eternity of 14 people on September 3rd in 1925. April 4th, 1975. At a time when most Americans used typewriters, childhood friends Bill Gates and Paul Allen found Microsoft, a company that makes computer software. Originally based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Microsoft relocated to Washington State in 1979 and eventually grew into a major multinational technology corporation. In 1987, the year after Microsoft went public, 31-year-old Gates became the world's youngest billionaire. Gates and Allen started Microsoft, originally called Microsoft, for microprocessors and software, in order to produce software for the Altair 8800, an early personal computer. Allen quit his job as a programmer in Boston, and Gates left Harvard University. The pair moved to Albuquerque because the city was home to electronics firm MITS, maker of the Altair 8800. By the end of 1978, Microsoft sales topped more than $1 million, and in 1979, the business moved its headquarters to Bellevue, Washington, a suburb of Seattle, where Gates and Allen both grew up. The company went on to license its MS-DOS operating system to IBM for its first personal computer, which debuted in 1981. Afterward, other computer companies started licensing MS-DOS, which had no graphical interface and required users to type in commands in order to open a program. In 1983, Allen departed Microsoft after being diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. He was successfully treated for the disease and went on to pursue a variety of other business ventures. In 1985, Microsoft released a new operating system, Windows, a graphical user interface that included drop-down menus, scroll bars, and other features. The following year, the company moved its headquarters to Redmond, Washington, and went public at $21 a share, raising $61 million. $21 a share. I wish. By the late 1980s, Microsoft had become the world's largest personal computer software company based on sales. In 1995, amidst skyrocketing purchases of personal computers for home and office use, Windows 95 made its debut. It included such innovations as the Start menu. TV commercials for Windows 95 featured the Rolling Stones singing "Start Me Up," and 7 million copies of the new product were sold in its first 5 weeks. During the second half of the 1990s, internet usage took off, and Microsoft introduced its web browser, Internet Explorer, in 1995. In 1998, the U.S. Department of Justice and 20 state attorney generals charged Microsoft with violating antitrust laws by using its dominance to drive competitors out of business. In 2001, the company reached a settlement with the government that imposed restrictions on its corporate practices. Also in 2001, Microsoft joined the video game market with the launch of its awesome Xbox console.